Assalamu alaikum. In this particular series, I'm going to talk about some other functions. So let's get started. So in this particular tutorial, I'm going to talk about functions which are integer, round, round up, and round down. So these are very important functions, and the understanding regarding these functions is critical. So let's create another sheet and take a sample data. We take a lot of numbers so that we can understand the concept behind all these functions. So I'm going to take some numbers, random numbers. Okay. All right. So let's talk about the function integer. If I have to define integer, I would say that it extracts the whole number from a given fractional number, right? So I've got these fractional numbers. Fractional numbers are those which have a decimal, and in Excel, you have to apply a different function in order to apply a particular operation on these numbers. So in Excel, if you are to consider only the whole number from this given fractional number, let's say if I consider the first number, which is 12.365, so the whole number part is actually only 12, and the fractional part is 0.365. But we are to consider only the whole number and not round the number off. Then we use the function of integer. So do not confuse integer with round, because integer does not round the number. It only considers the whole number in a given fractional number. So in order to apply integer function, we will apply equals to and int for integer. We open up the bracket, and the requirement for integer cannot be multiple cells or a range. It has to be just one number. As you can see, that you just need to specify one number, and you don't have to type the number out. You have to give the cell reference. So in this case, it is actually C5. So when I press enter, it will take out the whole number in this particular fractional number, which is only 12. So after pressing enter, we get the answer as 12. Although in maths, if we were to round this number in a whole number, the answer would have been 12 as well. But if you look at um, uh, the other number, which is 3.9, so in maths, if we were to round this figure to a whole number, the answer would have been 4, because 3.9 rounds off to 4. But if we apply the integer function for this particular cell, the answer will come out to be 3, because it will only extract the whole number from a given real number or a fraction number. And mind you, I use the real number term because in computers, real numbers are considered as fractional numbers. So when we give the cell reference as C6 and press enter, the answer comes out to be 3. It will only and only extract the whole number from a given real number. I hope this is clear. Let's move on to the next function, which is round. So in order to round a figure, one thing needs to be kept in mind, which is that how many number of places that you want to round it off. So we have the scenario of rounding off to a whole number, We also have the scenario of rounding it off to one decimal place, two decimal place, three decimal place, or we can also round it off to nearest tens, nearest hundreds, nearest thousands, and so on. So there are like three types of rounding off a number. Let's consider the first scenario, which is to round off to a whole number. So in order to do this, we put in an equals to sign, we type in round, and we open up the bracket. Now we get to see the requirements for this function, which is you need to specify the number, which is going to be in this case as C5. You put in a comma, and then you need to specify the second requirement in which you actually state that how many numbers do you want to round it off to. Let's say if we are to round it off to a whole number, the number of digits has to be 0. 0 means 0 decimal place. When 0 decimal place is stated, it will round it off to a whole number. And math says that 12.365 is going to be rounded off to a whole number. The answer will come out to be 12. And so is the case in round. If you look at the second number, we put in equals to round, open up the bracket, you select the series, and you put in the number of digits, which is 0. So now the case is going to be 3.9658 is going to be rounded off to a whole number, and the answer comes out to be 4. For the third scenario, equals to round, bracket open, you specify the cell, which is 145.639852, comma 0. So 0 decimal place, the answer comes out to be 146 because 145.6 will round it off to 146. Let's consider the fourth example, equals to round, bracket open, specify the number, put a comma, number of digits, 0 decimal place. You press enter, you get 24. Let's apply this for the last number. So equals to round, bracket open, specify the number, which is C9, comma, number of digits, 0 decimal place, and then you press enter. So answer comes out to be 7370. So this was the scenario in which we were rounding off the numbers in a whole number. You notice that I applied the function for each and every number. This is not how you are supposed to do in exams. You're supposed to apply the function in one cell and then you are to replicate. I will talk about the replication and the absolute cell referencing in another lecture, but for now I'm going to apply the functions individually. All right, let's talk about some other rounding off numbers to a decimal place. So equals to round, bracket open, and you specify the number as this. But this time, we are to round this figure to one decimal place. So the number of digits will come out to be 1. So if we are to round this off to one decimal place, 12.365 is going to be rounded off to 12.4. You close the bracket, press enter, and you get the answer as we discussed. So equals to round for the other number, bracket open, you specify the number, put in a comma. If we are to calculate this for one decimal place, you put in 1. Close the bracket, you get the answer as 4. Why did you get 4? Because 3.96 will round off to one decimal place, which is going to be 4, because now 9 is going to be rounded off to a 0, 1 will be carried forward, and 3 will be added 1. So answer comes out to be 4. For the third example, round, you specify the number, put in a comma, one decimal place, enter, you get 14.56 because the next number to 6 is 3 and 3 will not allow 6 to be rounded off to the next value, which is 7. So the answer remains as 145.6. I hope the concept is clear. If we are to round this number to 2 decimal place, the only difference or the only change that will come in your function is the number of digits. So for the 2 decimal place, you're going to put in 2 as your number of digits. You press enter, you get the answer rounded off to 2 decimal place. Same is the case for 3 decimal places. You specify round, open up the bracket, specify the number, put in a comma, 3 decimal place, you put in 3. If the requirement is 4 decimal place, you put in 4. If the requirement is 5 decimal place, you put in 5. So this is how you can specify the decimal places. Remember, for a whole number, the 0 is basically going to be the number of digits. So that is going to round it off to 0 decimal place. Okay, I hope this is clear. Let's talk about rounding off to a nearest value. Although I will say this and I will admit that never in O levels or A levels have we experienced that we have faced a scenario in which you were supposed to round the figure to a nearest 10 or 20 or let's say 100 or 1000. Okay, so how do you deal with that situation? If that comes up, you put an equals to sign, you start off the function with round, open up the bracket, you specify the number, and let's say it is to be nearest 10. For nearest 10, the number of digits you're going to put is minus 1. And nearest 10 is basically what? 12.365. The lower boundary for this particular number is 10. And the highest boundary for this particular number is 20. So the answer will come out to be 10 because 12 is closer to 10 and not to 20. If we had a number which was 15 or greater, the answer would have come to 20. So let's change our example from 12.365 to let's say 16.365. As soon as I press enter, the function is already applied for nearest n, so it will only reflect change on the function. So when I press enter, the answer comes out to be 20 because now 16.365 is closer to 20 rather than 10. Likewise, if you are to round the number to nearest 100, let's say we take this number as an example, we put in a comma, nearest 100. 100 has 2 zeros, so we put in minus 2. So you just need to consider the number of zeros in the nearest value. If it's nearest 1000, you put in minus 3. If it's nearest 10,000, so just count the number of zeros and you put in minus that number of zeros. So for nearest 100, it's going to be minus 2. You press enter and 145.639852 is actually closer to 100 and not to 200 because the lower boundary for 145 is 100 and the upper boundary for 145 is 200. So near rounding it off to a nearest 100 is going to give us 100 because 145 is closer to 100 and not to 200. If we change this number to let's say 185, the answer should change to 200. So when I press enter, the answer changes to 200. So this is how you calculate the nearest tens, hundreds, or thousands. Now, moving on to more functions like round down and round up. There's only one difference between rounding up and rounding down as compared to the round function. The rest remains the same, only the operation or how this is applied actually changes. As the name suggests, first let's talk about round down. So you type in a round down complete form. You open up the bracket, you specify the number, and then what do you have to do? You have to specify the number of digits. It can be a whole number, it can be some decimal places, or it can be a nearest 10, 100, or 1000. So let's say we are to round this figure down to a whole number. So you just put in 0 for 0 decimal place because that will give you a whole number. Now 16.365 when rounded down is going to give you 16 as it is. But look at 3.9. When we applied the round function, it gave us the answer as 4. But in this case, when we apply round down, it is going to forcefully round it down to a lower number. Let me type it correctly. So C6, comma, the number of digits 0. Although math says that this figure, if rounded off to a whole number, the answer should come out to be 4. But by applying the round down function, it will forcefully round the figure down to a whole number, which is 3 and not 4. I hope the concept is clear. So 185.6, if rounded off in maths as a whole number, the answer should come out to be 186. But when we apply equals to round down on this particular number, it will not round it off to 186, but it will keep it at 185 because it is actually the function of round down. It will forcefully round the figure down to a whole number, which is 185. I hope this will make the concept clear. Same is the case that you can apply for 1 decimal place, 2 decimal place, 3 decimal place, or nearest tens, thousands, or hundreds, or whatever. So the same concept applies. Even if the figure is to be rounded off to the next figure, it will not be. It will keep the figure down to its minimum value. It will not round it off. Let's talk about round up. As we saw that when we applied round down to 16.365, the answer came out to be 16. And this is exactly what math says, that if we are to round this figure to a whole number, it will keep it at 16 and not 17. But in the case of round up, this will forcefully round the figure up to the next figure, which is going to be 70. So number of digits we have specified is 0. That means it's going to be rounded this figure up to a whole number, a 0 decimal place. So the answer comes out to be 17, right? Same is the case with the next number. Or let's say we create a number which should not be rounding it off to the next number. So 185.2 should remain as 185 and not 186 or some other number. But we are going to apply equals to round up, bracket open. You specify the number, which is this, comma 0. So rounding it up to the next number. So the answer for this particular scenario comes out to be 186. I hope all the functions and all the concepts are clear for all these 4 functions. Okay, so you are the judge. You need to see what to apply because the examiner might or might not tell you that whether to apply round up, or round down. So you need to see that according to which scenario, which function is to be applied over there. Okay, I hope all these 4 functions are clear. I will see you in the next video to discuss more functions in detail. Thank you.